Well, good morning, and this morning we're here with Dr. Phil Harris, the Executive Director of the Association for Educational Communications and Technology. And Phil, we appreciate you joining us for the History Makers Project.
Thank you for the invitation, Barbara.
First, let's start off by having you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Well, I attended Indiana University as an undergraduate and then taught elementary level 5th and 6th grade in the Bloomington school system for 3 years, and then had an opportunity to return to graduate school at Indiana University, where I majored in psychology and research and elementary education as a minor. As a part of my research program, I was able to work with a psychology professor working on, at that time, one of the early versions of an instructional design program. It was named Programmed Tutoring. We had several meetings with Robert Gagne at Florida State. And at that time, I had no idea he would become the legend that he became. And to feel like I had a firsthand connection with him really grows more valuable the older I get. But that experience with the psychology department at Indiana University for 13 years really prepared me to move into a research directorship at Indiana University, being a part of the School of Education and the Department of Psychology, so I had a joint appointment there for a number of years before I moved into Phi Delta Kappa as the director of the new Center for Professional Development. So I feel like I've had a long history and a long experience base in some part of our instructional design field, and feel very fortunate to be able to have as a capstone of my career a relationship with AECT. And being able to be a part of helping to move this organization from Washington, D.C. To Bloomington I felt like a very important contribution. The organization was looking to find a location that would enable it to operate with less overhead expense. The University of Georgia and Florida State were two of the institutions that submitted a proposal along with the Agency for Instructional Technology for AECT to join. And AIT in Bloomington made the offer that the board at that time in 1999 chose as the best alternative for AECT. So the office was moved there. I was hired. We put together a small staff, and we've been growing ever since. What I thought was going to be maybe a year or two job in transition from to retirement turns out to be a whole new second career. So I feel very fortunate to have been able to really be a part of AECT and help it establish itself as a premier international organization again.
Okay. What do you see as some of the highlights of your involvement in AECT in the time that you have been with us?
Well, there's a couple of things that really stand out. One is that when I first became a part of AECT, much of the focus was still on the hardware and software that was being developed as a part of the shift in the technology movement. We had, during our convention sessions, it was not hard to find sessions dealing with specific pieces of software and how to use them, and then specific hardware and how to use that particular piece of hardware. But in the past decade, and we're now in 2012, in the past 10 years, the shift has been, I think, rather significant. In that if you would look at our convention program today, you probably wouldn't find any sessions dealing with either topic, the software or the hardware. The focus is really on learning. What ties this really disparate group of professional people together, from my perspective, is their simple overriding issue in learning. And learning is what everybody is about. Learning is what everyone wants as a part of their end product, whether they're teaching how to do something very basic or having long-term goals in an online class or in a face-to-face class. Learning is what drives what we do.
You spoke a minute ago about the diversity of the different groups that are housed within AECT, all the different divisions and some of the affiliate groups. And you suggested that learning is the key element that holds us all together. How do you see that diversity of groups changing over the years, staying the same? How do you think that's going to evolve?
Well, that's something I wish I knew I could live long enough to see how it ends up. When I think about the learning issues, at the beginning of my career, there was only one learning principle. There was only one learning theory, or else effectively one. The behaviorist was what drove everything everybody did. The cognitive group was just trying to establish some kind of toehold in the field and really struggled. And even in 2012, I'm not sure the cognitive science, the cognitive psychologists have really established a serious threat to behaviorism as it continues to drive much of what we do in terms of learning. But I think as we discover more about how the brain functions, how learning actually happens, we're going to find out what the difference is between conditioning and learning. And I think this disparate group that we have as a membership from all countries, from Europe, from Asia, are really going to help ferret out those key elements based on what scientists are understanding about how the brain functions and being able to piece this together in different ways that will enable us to think about new theories of learning, new understandings of the conditions needed for learning to occur. Mm-hmm. And I think this will even broaden our base of membership in the years to come, because we'll have even a broader group of people focusing on learning. If I was at a meeting recently in Indiana where there was a group talking about how important it was for teachers in the future to be first and foremost have a content major. And I sat there in that audience and listened to these so-called experts and wondered why none of them seemed to understand that learning is the content major for all teachers. But none of them seemed to recognize the importance of understanding learning. And I think that understanding is going to be the glue that will bind this future together in ways we're not sure of today.
Speaking of your involvement in the national conversation with regard to teacher professional development and current issues in education, you've been very active in the conversation related to testing and assessment, standardized tests, end of grade tests, No Child Left Behind. And so related to that, what role do you see AECT playing in that conversation?
Well, I think we're an organization that's in one of the best positions to really help the world understand that there are different ways to define learning, and we have to start out with a clear, concise definition of learning. All of the assessment that we're going through today assumes that learning is defined by number. And that number comes from the standardized test that supposedly represents some level of achievement if you can score some magic number. And I think AECT is going to help the world understand that assessment and evaluation has to be purpose driven. That when you want to evaluate something, I want to ask you, and for what purpose? Dr. Lockie, do you want me to evaluate the achievement of our nation's schools? Well, you might come up with an answer to that question. But from the answer to that question, I can start building a set of activities that are directly embedded in the purpose that you want to achieve in your assessment. And I believe that given the background of instructional design, every instructional designer worth their professional credentials starts with the purpose of my instructional program here is to. And as an organization, we understand it better than any other profession, that we have to help the nation or the world understand that all of our evaluation, assessment, and measurement, and many people don't make a distinction between those words. They think they mean all the same thing, and that's unfortunate too. Like evaluation and accountability has become such a mess that people who use the term accountability today are talking about evaluation and don't realize it. But I think we as an organization can help provide clarity, can help provide understanding of why these terms need to be defined, and because we as a group do it better than any other group. And I think we're in the prime position of any organization to really step into a leadership role in helping to define why is it that we have a public education system in the first place. Many people wonder, do we really need a public education system? And that question hasn't been discussed in our culture in about 200 years. And it's time that we reinforce, and I'm reluctant to use that behaviorist term, but to reinforce within our culture why Thomas Jefferson thought a public education system was essential to the survival of the democracy. And I think that's something that has been overlooked and dropped off the radar of many people. We don't think of it as being an important driver in our future. And I think, again, as an association, we're in a unique position to tie these important elements back together. And the understanding that I've appreciated of many of the leaders in this organization clearly shows me that we are right at the edge of being able to step out and provide the leadership to the world in this area.
Well, related to that, what do you see as the future of our organization?
My vision is fairly short-sighted, and it's hard to determine just where we might be in 5 years, much less 10 years. We now are at a point where the future of education is hard to predict because we have so many more options to obtain it today than we did 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. There was a time when education was defined by a location, brick and mortar. You could only go to school if you went to school. You could only learn if you were in school. You could only learn if you had a teacher in front of you, so to speak. We now have many more ways for individuals to learn and to learn about things they're interested in much greater detail. And I think this organization is in a position to really see that future quicker and more clearly than any other organization. We're not content driven. We're learning driven. We have such a special focus that we're not going to be tied to tradition as much as many other organizations. And if I were asked to, I could identify some organizations that'll disappear in the next decade because their focus is so narrow and so traditionally bound that they will become obsolete. AECT will never become obsolete because learning will never die. Mathematics will change, science will change, social studies will change, English will change, new content standards may be developed, but learning will never change. Now, how we think of learning, how we want to measure learning, how we want to define it, that's going to change all the time. And I believe, again, that this organization is set to really take advantage of this future. We have some things in our favor, not only including the membership, but the publications that enable us to really put information out quickly and accurately and timely. Timeliness is so important these days. And our publications itself are setting new standards in what's being published. Primarily our ETR&D research journal is one of the world's foremost journals today. Tech Trends, which is growing and is becoming the publication that we all wanted it to be. Our new online journals are really going to create a new opportunity for the world to see as we continue to define important elements of the learning process. And I believe understanding the elements of the learning process will be what shapes our future. I don't think we'll be driven as much by the latest handheld device, because who knows what that's going to be. I'm looking at the camera that's capturing our conversation and thinking about the simple size of these cameras over the last 50 years. As I mentioned before we started this, one of the early cameras I remember required 2 people to carry around. And those of you listening to this find that funny, but if you look into some of the old video, you'll find those huge cameras that took 2 very large men to manage. One to hold it and one to figure out where all the buttons were. So I think we're uniquely positioned to really build that future. We don't know for sure what it is, but we know what the elements are that we want to be a part of as an organization and what we have the capacity to do as a group of really competent, capable, and individuals.
Let me just ask you one more question. Do you have any really good stories that you'd like to share with us?
Well,
See, Phil, as the executive director, you have a long-term perspective on the organization, and you would have collected some good stories over the years.
there are some wonderful stories that one of the story I enjoyed telling the most was when we first moved to Bloomington, and we had some financial problems. I didn't know how serious they were, and we had a few, I was getting a few letters from law firms wanting to know what we were going to do about the certain debts. And one day I came into the office and the mail was there, and there was a letter from another law firm that I'd not seen. And so I told my secretary, I don't want to look at that one today. So about 4 o'clock that afternoon, I decided, well, I didn't have anything else to do that day, so I took that letter off the counter and opened it up. And when I opened it up, I just almost went speechless. It was a check for $375,000 from the Louise Benton Wagner estate. and I didn't know what to do with it. I wasn't sure it was real. You get these letters in the mail that you're the winner of $1 million of some sort, and you got to send $2 million to even find out.
Right.
So I called Kyle Peck, who was just the past president at that time, and I said, "Do you know anybody by the name of Louise Benton Wagner?" He said, "No." I said, "How quickly can you find out? Because she just sent us $375,000. Well, he asked me to call somebody, Robert Harrell, who was a past president, immediate past president. When I told Robert, he said, "I've heard of her, but I don't know who she is either." And so the third person I was asked to call knew her and knew her very well, and that was Addie Kinsinger. And Addie gave me a story of how this lady was a very important individual in AECT for all of her life. And she was not surprised that she left us such a huge part of her estate. Actually, we were one of 33 organizations to get $500,000. But this was really what enabled AECT to bounce back quickly. And to think that, I don't know what I would have done differently that whole day, but if I'd have opened up that letter in the morning, I don't know what I would have done the rest of the day, but I know I wouldn't have done what I did do, which was trying to figure out how to avoid talking to some people. But we've had some interesting activities with regard to the various leaders that have been a part of AECT, who have all been extremely dedicated individuals. And I have to say that one of the most exciting experiences of my tenure has to discover what real commitment and loyalty and dedication looks like. And I have 14 people to point to anyone who wonders what's leadership look like, what's loyalty look like, what's dedication look like. I've got a lengthy list of people who I can show you what it is, how it happens, and who to talk to about what it means. So I think my stories are in the people that I have had the good fortune to work with and be a part of, that has helped give this organization meaning and strength and future.
Well, thank you, Phil.